So let me tell you a little bit about Brendan. Brendan Nicholas Slocumb was raised in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He was the concertmaster for the University Symphony Orchestra at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro and served as the principal violinist. He has performed with numerous small chamber ensembles and in the BESK string quartet. For the past 23 years, he has been a public and private school music educator and is a Nobel Educator of Distinction. He also serves as an educational consultant for the Kennedy Center and is a concertmaster for the Nova Annandale Symphony Orchestra. The Violin Conspiracy is his first novel. Edward Kastenmeier, our moderator for this evening, is editorial director at Anchor Books and executive editor at Knopf Doubleday Publishing Group. A 30-year veteran of the publishing world, he has also long overseen the Vintage Crime Black Lizard publishing program. Edward has edited and published books by Alexander McCall Smith, Joe Nesbo, Robert Harris, James Elroy, among many others, and now adds Brendan to his impressive list. Welcome, gentlemen, and let me turn it over to Edward. We are so excited to have you, and we'll get back to questions at the end of the program. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. I'm also excited to be here. Thank you, Kathleen. I want to thank Amanda, who is also helping make this happen. And I want to thank Darien Public Library for hosting Brendan and I in this conversation. And I very much look forward to it. You know, I wanted to start by saying I first had the chance to read this novel, I think about a year and a half ago. And I've been obsessed with it ever since. It's thrilling to share this tale and to watch the excitement build person by person, reader by reader. It's a fabulous mystery that kept me turning the pages, but it's also a great underdog story of a person fighting to achieve their dreams against all odds. It's a fascinating portrait of the sort of cutthroat world of classical music. And not only couldn't I put it down, but I also have found myself pondering it ever since. It's a book that lives on in your life, and I think you'll have that same experience. One of the things I kept coming back to when I read this was how much it reminded me of The Queen's Gambit. You know, like Tevis's classic novel, it's a portrait of someone caught up in a passion that is so all-consuming, it's infectious. And it's equally enthralling, I think, if you know much about classical music, and if you don't. Either way, I'm convinced you'll fall in love with this novel as much as, as I did when I first read it. Brendan, thank you for coming this evening. Thank you for talking to me. As I said, I'm really looking forward to it. You know, in my intro, I mentioned some of the compelling aspects of this story: mystery, underdog story, a mesmerizing look at the rarefied world of the arts, an eye-opening examination of race in America, a fabulous page turner. Which of these came first? Where did you start with this? Where did all these ideas come from?
Well, first, it's awesome to be here with you, Edward, and thank you so much, Darien Library and everyone. This is a fantastic opportunity, and I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here. Edward, I always love talking to you. Which came first? That is a good question. I am going to say just in my head, the story of wow, that's a tough one. I don't know. If you ask me, it's one thing. If you ask Brendan the musician, it's one answer. If you ask Brendan the writer, it's another answer. So let's just say they all happened simultaneously.
One thing that I find curious is, have you always imagined yourself? Were you always a writer? You know, did you always imagine yourself being here one day, or are we just the benefit of COVID lockdown? You know,
I think that's probably fair to say. You know, when I was in high school, I did pretty well. You know, in my English classes and my writing and papers and everything, and I was very lucky to have the same English teacher for 11th and 12th grade. So I knew her pretty well, and I knew what her expectations were, and I would always wonder why I never got my writing assignments back. And one day I looked up on the bulletin board, and there they are. And I'm kind of like, oh, okay, well, she thinks that I got, something, there's some potential there. But I never would have thought that, yeah, the one good thing that happened from COVID is I think the Violin Conspiracy has been born, and I'm able to share the story with the world, and it's bigger than I ever thought it would be.
Do you think the time impacted the tale you told? Do you think that writing it during that period changed what you decided to write?
I think writing during the summer of 2020, actually, it was the perfect timing. I think all the stars and planets aligned, not only because of everyone being in lockdown and COVID, but because just things that were happening in the world, like the events with George Floyd. I think it was a really eye-opening time for people, and for the types of stories that are told in the Violin Conspiracy. People were much more receptive to receiving them, because there was a lot of things that if you don't have the experiences, people would think that they were just over the top, and whoa, there's no way this could be real. But seeing what happened with George Floyd, it expanded people's minds just a little bit to make them more receptive to things that they would not normally have experienced, and to give them a bit more validation. So I think everything just came together at the right time.
So, obviously, this is the story of Ray. Tell us about Ray. Who is Ray to you? What do you want us to know first about Ray and the character you've created?
Ray is, I think, just the greatest guy in the world. He is really very, he's kind of geeky just a little bit. He's very naive to a lot of things, but he's a fast learner. He's the type of person that takes people at their word, and he's just a nice guy. He's the guy that you want on your side. He's the guy that you want to hang out with. He's a good guy. And just watching his evolution in the story has been a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to write. A lot of people actually said to me, I'm really happy the direction that you took Ray in, because he could have turned out this way, or he could have turned out this way. He could have been bitter, justifiably so, but you just kept him so optimistic about everything. And Ray is an eternal optimist, much like I am.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. He has a remarkable strength. Where did Ray's strength come from? How did he come by that?
I like to think that the mentors in Ray's life, and I'm actually mirroring mine a bit, um, provides him with most of his strength and his resilience. I can honestly say I don't look at it. I took a lot of the experiences that Ray has in the book from my own life, and people would say to me after reading, man, you've had it tough, but you turned out so well. You're such a great guy. Brendan, you're so nice, even though you've been through these horrible things. And I don't look at it that way. I just look at it as, well, you have a choice. Everything is a choice. You can be bitter for the rest of your life, or you can just try to make lemonade out of lemons. And I like to think that Ray does the latter. He tries to take all the good that he can find, even when there's very little.
So you mentioned, the influences in his life. I mean, an obvious one being, I think, first and foremost, perhaps his grandmother. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Nora and what she means to Ray and how important she is in his, evolving character?
Absolutely. Grandma Nora is Ray's number one fan. She is his number one supporter. And when I tell you she loves him, she loves him. That is the epitome of what love is. And he knows it, and he loves her just as much as she does him, and she believes in him. And she's the first person that he encounters, and one of the only people that actually believes in him. She has no doubt that he can be successful, and she knows the type of person Ray is capable of being. And she tells him every opportunity she gets. She just wants him to stay sweet, regardless of what life throws at him, because she knows that it's going to be a tough life, for a young Black man growing up, and she just wants him to stay sweet and to stay very nice, and she always supports him in everything that he does, and he never forgets that.
You know, that to me, immediately takes me to the rest of Ray's family, which, shall we say, are not quite so supportive. His
Not
mother,
quite.
the rest of his family really don't get Ray. And, drilling into that a bit, I found myself pondering, does how would Ray's life be different if his family supported him the way Nora did? Like,
Wow.
does he get some of the strength from the adversity? How does that impact him? Could you delve into
That's
that a
a
little bit?
great question. I think if Ray's family actually did support him, he probably would have gone on a lot sooner to, superstardom, even without the incidents that take place with his violin. Um, he would not have had a cheap, beat up school instrument. His mom probably would have sacrificed to get him a decent instrument, and given him opportunities and made sacrifices for him to take lessons, etc. If everyone was in his life was as supportive as Grandma Nora was. But I also think that the adversity that he's had to face also builds a lot of his strength and a lot of his character. We all have to face adversity at some point in our lives, and we can either let it build us up or we can let it tear us down. And I think Ray really did a good job of letting it strengthen him. He didn't like it and it wasn't cool, but he learned from it all.
The other thing that struck me about Ray is, in addition to being an eternal optimist and looking for good when it's not necessarily right there in front of you, I also think about Ray's relationship to family,
Mhm.
right? Like, even all, we won't get into them because people need to read the novel, but there's a lot of adversity in his relationship with other members of his family. And yet, family remains very important to Ray, I think. Can you talk a little bit about that? What does family mean to Ray?
I think family to Ray means everything. It's not the family that he necessarily wants, but it is the family that he has. And it not everything is sunshine and flowers. Not everything, but that's okay, because although he does get treated not the best by all of his family members, he still loves them, and I think that comes from all he needs is love from one person in his family, and he gets that. I think he gets enough love from Grandma Nora to offset, the not so much love that he gets from maybe mom and maybe some of his aunts and uncles and everything. But I think Grandma Nora really instills in him how important family is. It's like, just because people don't understand you doesn't mean that they don't necessarily love you. So always, keep that in the back of your mind when you're going through these situations, or someone doesn't understand you, doesn't mean that they don't love you.
The other, in talking about sort of his mentors and the people who helped him, obviously one would very quickly go to Janice Stevens, Dr. Stevens. Tell us a little bit about her role in his life, but also I'm curious to hear. Well, tell us a little bit about her role in his life.
Okay.
Start out with.
Dr. Janice Stevens is, I like to, compare her to Grandma Nora in the fact, like, she's the professional Grandma Nora. She basically picks up where Grandma Nora leaves off in supporting Ray, and, just having his back and giving him the support that he needs, and giving him the encouragement and, just the pushes that he needs. Because there are several instances where Ray is just, I can't do this. This is not for me. I should have quit a long time ago. And she instills in him. She manages to make him dig down deep and find, the strength and the resilience to go on, even though something is difficult and he doesn't think that he's doing well. And like, she's his number one cheerleader, I think, right after Grandma Nora. So she's very, very important to him. And I think she came into his life right at the right time.
Do you? I'm curious whether you feel like all musicians have a Dr. Stevens in their lives. Do you think that that's something most budding musicians need? Or do you think it's kind of unique to Ray's circumstance and the lack of support in other corridors in his family that sort of make that really important?
I'm speaking as a professional musician myself, and the musicians that I have, been in touch with and associated with. Every single one of us has a Dr. Janice Stevens in our life. Every single one of us. They come in the form of either a teacher or a friend or a family member. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a bass player, and one of his Dr. Janice Stevens was his older brother, who was like 4 years older than him. Who, when he was 2 years old, he started teaching him music, and he looked up to him as an adult. Even though he's like 4 years older than him. So every musician that I've talked to, every artist has someone in their life that has always been their main source of support.
You know, Mary Gerster, is that how you say her name? Asks, can you give us some sense of the plot? I feel like maybe I dove into the deep end and I've left perhaps some of our audience behind. So let's take a step back and talk about the book as a whole. Give us a little introduction to the setup for the novel, and then what the overall arc of the novel looks like.
Violin Conspiracy is a story of Ray, who discovers that his old family fiddle is actually a priceless Stradivarius violin. And this discovery catapults him into superstardom in the world of classical music. And right before the Tchaikovsky Competition, which is the Olympics of classical music, his instrument is stolen. Was it his family who thinks that he should sell the instrument and, split the money between the family members? Was it the Marx family who think that they used to own their great great grandfather used to own Ray's great great grandfather, and they say that the violin was stolen and it's rightfully theirs? Who could it have been? Will he get it back? Will he compete? Will he win? You got to read it to find out.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. I think it was good to take a sort of a macro view of it. And actually that sort of brings up a good point. At what point, we talked about, or I asked you about sort of the different aspects of the story. When did you realize it was a mystery? Did you know that at the beginning, that it was going to be structured as a mystery? Did you start with the missing violin, or did that come a little later in the writing process?
Believe it or not, that the mystery aspect came a bit later into it. When I started writing this, there's a big chunk that is now in my scraps pile, because it started off with Ray in high school, in his high school classroom. And yeah, my agent and I talked about it. It's a bit too YA there, so we had to push that back a little bit, and it's in the scraps pile. But the mystery aspect came a lot later, maybe halfway through the book. It's like, okay, I recall having my own instrument stolen, and the feelings that it evoked. It was just terrible. It's a terrible feeling. It's like a hole in your soul is missing when your instrument is stolen, because your instrument is like an extension of your body. And I figured, yeah, that would be some. I think we should capitalize on those feelings, since I have firsthand knowledge, and that's where the mystery element came in. It was about halfway through.
And that actually brings me to a point that I always find interesting about this book is Ray's remarkable connection to that instrument, the importance of that instrument to Ray. In a funny way, it's hard to imagine him on some level without that instrument, becoming who he became. Do talk a little bit about that? And also, do you think that that's common for serious musicians, that they have an instrument that speaks to them? Doesn't necessarily, obviously, in most cases, not a Stradivarius, but still, do you think do you have that sort of passion with instruments in your life? And do you
A-
think others?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't think it matters what instrument it is you play for musicians, even people who play piano. what you just the instrument actually calls to you. It's like that scene in Harry Potter where they put on the hats and the hat tells them which house they're going into. It's the same thing with instruments. When I was trying out violins, a while back, I had a line of 15 violins that I would try, and I kept going back to the same one every time, for the same reason. This one just, it feels right. It calls to me. And your instrument really is an extension of your body, of your personality, of your soul. It becomes a part of you. And, you're doing this for hours and hours at a time, and if you don't have it anymore, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? I feel like I feel underdressed. Um, but yeah, I truly think that instruments are parts. They are extensions of the musicians that play them, and they do. It's almost like the instrument chooses you as opposed to you choosing the instrument.
Well, and that brings up an interesting point for me because I would hazard to guess that Ray sort of loses his instrument is stolen at perhaps the worst time it could be stolen, pretty close to it. How does he deal with that, and how does that impact his performance? So he's participating in a musical competition at the time. Let's not tell people the end result, but just a little bit of sort of background as to what Ray has to go through to try to carry on as he looks for his instrument.
Well, having had an instrument stolen myself, it is the absolute worst feeling in the world. You just when you're a musician and you're practicing, you spend hours and hours and hours with your instrument. I'm going to say violin, as a violinist. And there have been times where I have left. I don't know what I was thinking. I was young and not very smart. I've left my instrument sitting someplace and I've gone off, and then all of a sudden, I forgot my instrument. Where is it? And then you run back, and it's the worst feeling in the world. It is. I can't even describe how empty you feel. You feel like you've lost something. And just the fact that, and I know that I was being irresponsible when I did that, and the fact that Ray's instrument means so much to him. It was given to him, by his grandmother, and what the instrument symbolizes and all the history that it contains. The fact that he felt like he was irresponsible because he lost the instrument. I mean, on top of having to compete without the instrument, on top of having to practice on a different instrument that's not the one that you're used to, and then on top of that, you're thinking the whole time, oh, I can't believe I let this happen. I'm irresponsible, I'm unworthy, I let this happen. It's just everything is compounded, and it's tough. It's really tough for him, and it's always on your mind. Always, it until you get your instrument back, it never leaves your mind.
This is sort of switching gears a bit, but you mentioned history. And one of the things I think is fascinating about this story for me is that the intersection of the lived moment, particularly concerning racism in Ray's life, and the history,
Mhm.
the legacy that he's also living in. Can you speak to a little bit about that and how that colored the way you told the story? What?
Absolutely. Yeah. The historical aspect of the violin, and the historical aspects of what I wanted to share in the story. I wanted everything to be as accurate as possible. There are scenes where there's a history of a family history is being recited, and I did my best during research and everything just to make it as accurate as possible. And there's one section where it's pretty graphic, and it's there's some brutal things that take place, and I wanted, when we were in school, in elementary school, at least the way I remember, America had slaves, black people picked cotton, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and there's that. Yes, that all happened, but there's so much more that happened during that period of time that people are just unaware of. And I really wanted it to be as accurate as possible and to bring a sense of realism to what it was, why Ray is so desperate to get this instrument back, because it does hold so much history, history that's really, really, really important, not only to his family, but just to Black people in general, it just holds so much. So it's very, very, very important for so many reasons, and that's one reason he's so desperate to get the violin back.
Do you think, I mean, I know looking behind you, I would know if I didn't know already that you're a fan of comic books. And I wonder do you feel like that was an influence on this novel? Because you love those, you read them, you're passionate about them. Is Ray a hero in some sense? Do you think that you channeled some of that in creating this character in this story?
Edward knows I like comic books. I have them all over the place. They're all over my desk. Yeah, I do like to think that my passion for comics influenced Ray in a sense, because a lot of stories that I read in comic books and I've read over the years, there's a hero, and the hero has trials and tribulations, and there are temptations. Is he going to stay a hero? Is he going to turn bad? Is he going to ask for help? What is he going to do? And that formula, I think it works. It's worked for so long, and I think a little bit that does have a bit of an influence in the way that I wrote Ray.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I can sort of, there is a heroic element to the story and to the quest. Um, you know, I, I think, you are a lifelong educator. How's your experience in education? How did that influence your writing? Do you feel like that colored it?
Yes, actually, I have met so many people and been in so many different situations and experienced just all kinds of people, not only in the different schools that I've taught at, but the types of students that I've been able to teach, and it's given me a wide range of just different kinds of just different perspectives, and I really enjoy learning about people, different cultures, just the way people, a 15-year-old boy is so much different than a 15-year-old girl, and it's just like if I'm writing something from a 15-year-old boy's perspective, I mean, it's like night and day from what I would write for a 15-year-old girl. Also, what kids have to go through and how adults deal with what kids have to go through. I've a wealth of experience dealing that way, and I joke with my students sometimes. Yeah, could someone translate for me? I don't speak teenage girl very well, so I don't know how to say this without making her even more upset. So can someone help me? But yeah, just different perspectives has it's really given me it's enlightened me on different perspectives.
Um, I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say, given that it's not a pivotal moment in the book, but Ray ends up being a teacher. Was that important to you?
Yes, 100%. Because everything that Ray had, everything, all of his successes, all of his triumphs, all of his growing and his learning was because someone took an interest in him, and they shared their gifts as a teacher. So Ray feels that it's extremely important to give back in that way, and not only is he happy to do it, but he's really good at it. So, it would be a shame to waste that talent and that potential and not do for others what was done for him. So it's important to him to give back in that way.
That sort of, obviously you have a powerful connection to music. Ray has a powerful connection to music. Do you have any insight as to where that comes from? Do why does Ray love music? Why is that the passion he pursued as opposed to soccer or physics?
If
Or
I'm going way back in Ray's backstory, I like to think that I think he got it from his grandma Nora. That was part of the story that didn't make it into the novel, but I like to think that grandma always told him stories about how her pop would play the fiddle, and when the opportunity came for Ray to play fiddle, play violin in school. He jumped at it naturally because he loved his grandmother so much and she was so close to him. And wow, she talked about it all the time. Hey, grandma, look, I can do this now. I'm doing the same thing that you've been telling me about, as long as I can remember. So maybe as a tribute to his grandmother.
Um, Now that you're sort of out in the world and you're doing events and talking about your book, do you, it makes me wonder, what is the relationship between a musical performance and writing a novel? Are they similar creative acts in your mind, or are they very disparate for you?
I actually find more similarities. I think in music, you sit down and you practice for hours and hours and hours to get a specific result. And when you do get that result, it's very very satisfying. When you're writing, you write and then you go back and edit and then you let someone read and then you take their suggestions and it's basically the same process. It's just a bit more drawn out. It's not instant gratification for me, but when it does come together, oh my gosh, it is the best feeling in the world. I am so proud of this book. So I think they really do correspond to each other, and I've got I think being a musician, being an artist, really helped me in the writing of this book because I just it's like when I'm practicing. Okay, in the beginning, it's not that great. Yeah, it's okay, and then it gets better and better and better as you go along. With the edits and everything and the suggestions. I tell you, I think they're almost one and the same. I'm glad I'm a musician who wrote about music. That really really helped me out a lot.
Yeah, and you do such a wonderful job with it. I mean, I one of the things that's remarkable to me is my guess is you've never participated in the Tchaikovsky competition, but that so comes to life on the page for me. How did you channel that? How did you get a sense of what that sort of high level classical music competition was like?
I decided to live vicariously through Ray. I aged out of the Tchaikovsky competition. I forget what the actual, and I should know this because I did so much research on this. I think I want to say it's 28 or 30 is the age out. And, had I started playing violin when I was maybe 4 or 5, as opposed to 9 years old, that's really a late start, starting at 9. Maybe I would have been able to compete in the Tchaikovsky competition. I remember in college looking at brochures, for previous winners, and the competition was coming up, and here's the repertoire list. It's like, oh, I haven't gotten to this piece yet. No, I can't do it. So it was a nice way for me to live vicariously through Ray. I can't. I can have my violin stolen like he can, but I can't compete in the Tchaikovsky competition. So you know what? I'll let Ray do that through me. So that was a lot of fun to do, actually.
One of the, one of the things that is interesting to me, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, that all of the music referenced in this novel is classical. Is that a true statement? And if it is, do you think Ray listens to music that's not classical?
There are, I think, two references to non-classical pieces. There are two references to hip hop pieces. And yes, Ray is not only a classical musician, he is a musician, a broad musician. He appreciates everything. And
Mm,
he's always
nice.
learning. He learns from, there's a scene where he's listening to someone appraise his instrument, and he's listening to a certain type of music, and Ray is just like, wow, you listen to classical and this kind of stuff. Wow, that's actually pretty cool. I didn't know you could do that. Okay, I'm going to try that and see. Oh, I actually like it. It's good stuff. Ray's just open to everything. Much like myself, I just, people would say to me, I'm listening to a Beethoven symphony. You're like, what are you listening to? I'm just kind of like this with my earbuds in, and they're like, what are you listening to? Oh, this is Beethoven. What? 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 It's like, don't you know that 311 has a new album out, or the Beastie Boys have a new? Yeah, 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 I listen to that stuff too, but this is good stuff too. And I'm just eclectic that way, and I think Ray is as well.
You created a playlist for the novel, and that makes me think. Makes me want to ask you, who are Ray's favorite composers?
Ray's favorite composers have to be Vivaldi, definitely. L'Inverno, which is winter from the Four Seasons, that's a sticking point in the entire novel. One of Ray's favorite pieces, and mine as well. Vivaldi, and let me see who else. Probably Mozart. There's a lot of Mozart that Ray enjoys playing in the book as well, and I'm a huge Mozart fan as well. One of my favorite Mozart violin and piano sonatas, the A major. I love playing that piece, and I haven't played it in a while. You know what? I might actually get it back out and dust it off now that you mentioned
Sounds good.
that.
Sorry you don't have your violin to do it for us right now.
It's sitting in the corner staring at me.
Yes. So um, I think readers are often interested in writers' writing process. Do you have a place you write? Do you have what do you need to fuel the fire or to feed the fire, as it were?
I like to, believe it or not, a lot of people think that I would be the type of person to write with classical music in the background. That is one of I can't do it. I've tried, I can't. I'm
Right.
constantly analyzing the music. It's like, I like that movement a little faster. Oh, the flute's a little off there. Oh, I could use more violin there constantly. So I'm not even, focusing on what it is that I'm writing. I do like to have background sounds. So I start off in my living room with the TV on. I don't even care what's on, if it's news or a sitcom or whatever. I do like to have some background noise. I start in the living room flat on my back with my computer on my chest, and then I put my feet up, and then I sit up and write, and then I come to my office and I finish up there. This is after sections 1, 2, and 3. I like to outline everything extensively, and it's just boom, boom, boom. Okay, I'm going to work on this section. Now I'm going to work on this, and I'm going to work on this. And I always end up in my office is where I finish writing for the day. I start in the living room, end up in my office with orange juice and popcorn all the time. Those are my go-tos.
Right. Um, how do you capture different people speak differently? Writing character is always a difficult aspect of the writing process. How do you capture dialogue in the way people, do you go out in the world and listen to people? Do you have memories? Do you have models for these characters beyond, you've talked about a few. Nora was modeled on your grandmother, and Dr. Stevens was modeled on your mentor. But in general, the marks say perhaps a family as far from your experience as we could get.
I like to, honestly, it's I when I'm writing dialogue, I pretend that someone is standing right in front of me whom I'm speaking with. And every one of the characters that I have written, I've met at some point in my life. There's some point I've run into them, or I've seen them speak, or at something like that. And I like to, kind of sit and have a pretend conversation. What would this person say? What would they sound like? Even the sound of their voice. I like to, as I'm writing and I'm typing, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is what this person sounds like. And if I write something and I go back and read it, no, that doesn't quite work, because that's not what they sound like. I have it in here now. I need to make sure it goes on the page. But I'm having that conversation, and I've met every single person at some point in my life. I guess that's the good thing about having, I've gotten the opportunity to teach so many different kinds of kids, and I've met all of the parents and the teachers and staff that I've worked with, so many different kinds of people. I've in being a musician, just hearing everybody and meeting people, every single person I've met, and they've got a distinct voice.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes sense. I mean, I often I know a lot of writers sort of create a whole backstory for all their characters
Mhm.
so that they can sort of channel how would they respond in this situation, and that's always a tricky thing to do. One of the things I found remarkable about the book was the pacing. You remember, our publisher Suzanne Hers
Mhm.
talked very early on about just the wonderful pacing from chapter to chapter. How did you pull that off? How did you get that right? Because it was there when I first read the book. It was already fully there. I'm curious how you channeled that.
I'm really happy to hear that because that's the same formula that I'm going to use for everything else that I write. Just going back and doing a lot of reading, I'm reading and I'm going on. I wanted to write as if I were watching a movie. I want a fast paced book. I want a page turner. I'm like, okay, what happens here? All right, is this okay? Is what's going to happen? I can't wait to if I'm reading it and I'm not on the edge of my seat, just waiting to turn the page. Then okay, this is way too slow here. The pacing has slowed down, and I don't want to make it. It's great. And then there's a chapter. There were a couple of chapters that I actually needed to switch around because the pacing would just end abruptly. I'm like, okay, no, this is not good. I wanted to keep going. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. If I am, I don't want to say bored for lack of a better term, but if I am not excited about what's coming next, how can I expect someone to, whoever's reading it for the first time to be excited as well? So I did do a lot of, there was a lot of comparing and contrasting. I was like, okay, so if I put this here, is this going to slow down the pacing? If I put this, you know what, let's move this around. And I think it worked out. I think it worked out rather well, and I was very happy with it. Again, like I said, I want to watch it like I'm reading it like it's on a movie screen. I want to be entertained every single page.
No, that makes sense. And I think both with that and with character, you've clearly got a good ear for the way language works because, I just felt like it just came to life. And, one of the trickiest things I think in writing is, you know, the few little brushstrokes that bring a scene to life. And I thought you did a fabulous job of that, right? You didn't give us the whole backstory of the character. You may know it in your head, but thankfully it's not on the page. We get just enough to sort of feel who that person is, how they're interacting here. And I thought you really do have a remarkable ear for that, I think. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Um, I think Kathleen is going to maybe has come up with some questions from the audience. Kathleen, do you have
Hi.
anything people
Well,
would like to hear?
that was just terrific. Both of you gentlemen are so fun to listen to. We have a bunch of duplicate questions. A number of people wanted to know: is there another book for Ray, and will there be another book in general?
Well, yes, there will be another book. Ray, not so much. I'm thinking at this point, Ray's story is, it's done. But anything could happen. You never know. You never know. He might pop up someplace down the line. But yeah, for right now, Ray's story is pretty much done. And yes, there is another book in the works right now.
Oh, good.
My fantastic editor has given me a ton of revisions to do, all of which are phenomenal, and I'm mad that I didn't think of them myself. And Edward, you'll be happy to know I'm actually getting to work on those right now.
Good.
And
I'm
books,
excited.
books. Second book is in the works. It's in the it's being revised right now, so it's going to be good. I'm really excited about it. I can give you a quick elevator pitch if you want.
Sure.
All right, all right, all right. So the working title is The Composer's Last Score, and you don't have to be music centered to actually get the gist of the story. But America's preeminent composers, bigger than Beethoven and Bach and Mozart, everybody, he's huge. His 150th anniversary celebration is coming up, and his family, his descendants who run his foundation, are throwing a huge gala in his honor, and it's going to be viewed across the world. So they hire a musicologist to do some research. One aspect is they want to know why he was so close to the Black community. During his research, the musicologist discovers, this guy may not have written any of his music, and it was potentially appropriated from a Black woman who we might think lives with autism, and the family will stop at nothing to keep this a secret.
Wow, that's quite the pitch.
Yeah,
We have
and
someone.
and people will be excited to hear. I think we're going to publish next spring. We're hope that's our plan currently. So more to come, and not too long to wait, I hope.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. Since you like your books to move along quickly, have you been optioned already for a movie?
Speaking of quick, oh my goodness, yes. Sony jumped right on it.
Oh, awesome.
Sony is they have a limited series in the works right now, and
That's great.
just don't ask me who's going to play Ray. I would be the natural choice, but I don't think there's enough Just for Men to cover this up for me to play Ray. But
Oh, that's wonderful. We had someone ask about when did you start to play, and what are your feelings about the Suzuki method?
I started playing when I was 9 years old. I was in the fifth grade through a public school music program. Suzuki, I am all for Suzuki. I'm not a fan of exclusive Suzuki, but to get kids started, I think it's fantastic. The only aspect for those of you that don't know Suzuki, it's everything is by rote. The teacher plays, and then the student plays what the teacher does, and that's great. They just learn to read music a little bit later. That comes later. I'm a big fan of learning to read music as you learn to play, but I'm a total fan of Suzuki in the very beginning.
Let's see. We had a question. How long did you think about Ray before he came alive on paper?
That would be me at 9 years old. I think that's when it started.
Let's see what else we've got. Oh, I know. Would you talk a little bit about your podcast?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm so happy to be a part of this podcast. It's called How Music Can Save Your Life, and you can find it wherever you find your podcasts. And I have interviewed some of the most fascinating people with some of the most incredible stories, and they all have a very similar thread. It's at some points you don't know who's interviewing whom. It's like, okay, is Brendan being interviewed, or is he interviewing, Brian Young from the Baltimore Symphony? Because we have identical stories, and just knowing that there are people out there with the exact same stories who have, gone on to do these amazing things, and they give some of the most incredible advice, and they have in just an insane amount of good advice for people to listen to, and they're really heartwarming stories, and everyone will get something out of it. Check it out.
That sounds great. How do they find it?
Anywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you find your podcasts.
Under your name?
Yeah, you can do my name, Brendan Slocumb, or under How Music Can Save Your Life.
Okay. Someone also asked, is your playlist on Spotify?
My playlist is on Spotify.
Yay.
Please check it out. You'll love it. You'll love it.
Let's see what else. Let's see if we're. Someone asked, what is your favorite piece of music?
Ooh,
Too hard.
That's a tough one. I'm going to narrow it down. I have so many favorite classical composers and, contemporary artists as well. I'm going to go with my favorite composer is Vivaldi.
Oh, nice. I know that's a horrible question to ask people because there's so many good answers. Let's see. There's been some new initiatives to teach children classical music, to get them more involved in classical music. Do you have any ideas for that?
Any ideas for new? I just think, in general, just exposure. Just as we play the songs that we teach kids, as an elementary music teacher, I like to teach what I call the classics. Like I teach America the Beautiful. I teach, I've been working on the railroad. Let's introduce these classical music to these kids at the exact same time. I think it's all about exposure. That's the best way to get kids, just interested, just exposure.
There's a scene in the book at a wedding where some young people come to play, and I heard it was based on a real experience for you. Can you talk about that without giving away too much of the book?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
The actual experience took place when I was in college, and it's modified slightly in the story, but it actually did take place. And we were playing at a wedding, and we thought it went off without a hitch. Everyone was happy. The bride was happy. The mom was ecstatic. And Dad could not wait to get us out of the church, and he just hurried us out. And he looked us right in the eye and said, "You ruined my daughter's wedding." And we're just kind of like, all right, what's going on? And then it took a moment for it to sink in what he was referring to, and I could just see the hatred in his eyes. It was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that, and it stuck with me for a very long time.
That's such a terrible scene. Someone wrote in, has writing a book changed the way you think about education?
Ooh, wow. Yes, actually. I think especially music education. Um, Now, even more so than it was in the beginning for me. I think music education is even more important. Arts education in general, just the creative aspect that kids really need. You need a creative outlet. Not everyone is on the doctor track or lawyer track or engineer track, and creative outlets, like writing and music and art, visual arts, and just it's so important. Had I not had those outlets, I would not be here right now. I know that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge advocate for arts in every realm.
Let's see. And then someone just made a comment, not every kid is a sports kid either.
That's true.
That is true. The world has lots to offer all of us. Let's see what else we have here. We have, since you are such a strong outliner for your books, did you know the ending when you began?
Absolutely not. I'm a huge fan. Edward knows I'm a huge fan of Agatha Christie, and she liked to do this thing where, okay, I'm going to write the whole story, and then I'm going to find out. I'm going to go back and write in the killer. I'll say who the I'm a huge fan of that, and I'm like, all right, who could it be? All right, let me. Okay, I got it. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go back and make it work. That's how I did. I had no idea in the very beginning.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good one we picked. Someone wanted to know how much you have to practice to keep your skills strong.
How much I need to, or how much I do?
Either or.
At least, at the very least, an hour a day, at the very, very least. And I used to do 3.5 hours every day, but there's just so much going on, with work and lessons and just life. You don't really have a chance to practice 3.5 hours. If you can carve out 3.5 hours in a day, if I had the time, I absolutely would do it. But for at least an hour a day.
Yeah. And then I have another question. Do you prefer to write or to play?
Well, since my editor is right here, I'm going to say right. But offline, ask me that question again, and I'll probably give you a different answer. But I'm going to go with right because Edward's right here.
Yeah. And I want to jump in and ask a question. When you're writing a book, how many hours a day do you write?
About 3.5.
About 3.5.
Yeah. It's to me, it's the equivalent of sitting down and practicing. It's no big deal for me to just sit and write, and the time passes just like that.
We have someone who said, still hoping you'll come to Boston. And let's see.
I want to come to Boston. Wait, shout out to everybody in Boston. The Boston chapter in the book, that was totally made up. I promise nothing happened to me like it did in Boston. So I'm happy to come to Boston.
Someone wanted to know what your favorite part of the bookmaking process is.
Getting to see people's reaction. I just wanted to write a story that someone liked. That's all I wanted to do. But seeing the reaction that people have had to this novel has just been unbelievable. And every single day I wake up and I literally pinch myself because I can't believe, just how much the thing has blown up, and it's been amazing. And I just wanted someone to like it, and I think I've gotten that in spades, and it's just fantastic.
Okay, here is ask Brendan about his band, please. I'm doing that.
My band is called Geppetto's Wood. I know that's clever. I didn't come up with the name. Geppetto's Wood, and I am the singer. I know it doesn't sound like this voice that I have. I'm a singer, but I actually can sing pretty high. I'm a singer, and I play keyboards, and I'm the songwriter in the band. And my former students actually make up the band with me, a guitarist and a drummer and a bass player who's a good friend, who's also really, really talented. And I taught them when they were in high school and junior high, and now they're adults And during a break, someone will crack open a beer, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, you're over 21. I keep forgetting. I always think that you're 15. So yeah, it's just, I mean, I love these guys. They're fantastic. Geppetto's
How
Wood
would you
has its.
describe your music? What genre do you play in, or how would you describe it?
I like to call it pop alternative. It's like pop music with an edge. It's really edgy. It's like it's reminiscent of a lot of '90s music, but a little edgier.
All right, we've got two more questions that I can see. Has the time writing taken time away from your performing and teaching? And she says, I'll pick up a book tomorrow.
Yes, actually, it has. I am not going to be able to play a concert that I was supposed to play next month because I will
Oh,
be traveling. No, it's okay. I played all the music before. It's fine. They'll be fine. Um, I'll be traveling to California, and I won't be able to play. And I've actually had to postpone a lot of lessons for my students just because of
yeah.
interviews and appearances and everything. But they totally get it. You know, the when I did get back to an in-person lesson a couple of weeks ago, my student Sam, he said to me, "Mr. Slocumb, it is so nice to see you." I said, "Yeah, I know it's been a month." He said, "No, it's been 6 weeks." Okay, all right, you're keeping tabs, but he did play beautifully. That means that he's been keeping up with his practicing. So yeah, it's been worth
That's
it.
good. And it's good to be wanted.
Oh
All
yeah.
right. And I think this might be our last question, at least the last one I can see. Love the book. So, given that better representation in opera houses and symphony orchestras depends on a more equitable arts education, which occurs 15 to 20 years earlier, as an educator, how does more equitable art education happen? I'm sorry for stumbling over that.
Oh, that's no sweat. More equitable art education happens. I think it's got to start at the top, and it starts with parents being advocates for arts programs. You know, instead of taking the kids to your kids to see a symphony once a year, let's see if there's a way that we can go once a month. Instead of renovating an $80 million music hall, let's take that money and send the orchestra. Let's send them to this part of the city and this part of the city and
Mhm.
this part of the city, so people who would not have access to the $80 million music hall will have an opportunity to experience the culture that the symphony brings. There are just so many things that you can do, but it starts with advocacy. Parents,
Yeah,
write your school boards, write your senators, write everyone, write the arts council. If you don't have an arts council, see if you can get one started.
that's great advice. Well, Edward, do you want to add anything? Because we're coming down to the last 4 minutes.
Well, I know Mary Gerster asked, how did you find a publisher and did you have rejections?
Did I have rejections? Oh my gosh. Yes, I don't think that I would call myself a legitimate writer if I did not have rejections. And when I first started, I wrote my first manuscript 20 years ago, and it was a science
Oh,
fiction thing. And at some point, I'm going to rewrite it. I am, because I really like the story. But I got so many rejections, and I got a lot of good advice that said, write what you know. I was like, okay, I know music, so I'm going to write what I know passionately about music. And some other good advice I got from a friend of mine, Eli Craner, who's got a new book out, and which is a fantastic book. Um, he said, write honestly, because if you don't believe it, how can you expect anyone else to?
great advice.
Yeah.
Well, let me remind everyone that this is at Barrett Bookstore. We have plenty of copies here. Many of them are out, so you'll be on a wait list, but don't let that deter you, or just go grab a copy at Barrett's and you'll be all set. You will read this. It'll be next weekend. It'll be your favorite thing to do. I blew through this book and it was so good. And I'm so glad to hear we can see it on the screen one of these days. So thank you, gentlemen, so much. This has been such a pleasure. And thank you to the audience who participated. And we're looking forward to your next book.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Kathleen.
Thank you
All right.
so much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Scott.
Edward.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Brendan. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.